This is my VR50. It's the first one I bought. It's 7 years old now. Been well used and abused. Serial number 0751. It's just started to make a little bit of a noise on the retrieve. So I'm wondering if something's got a little bit dry, or there could be a little bit of corrosion or a worn bearing. And say 7 years old. It's doing very well. So I'm going to give it a quick look through, overrun, check out the state of the bearings and the seals and the grease, and do anything that needs to be done. So first off, take off the handle, take off the spool, put those to one side. Couple of things to watch on the VR50s is the bell arm can get a little bit stiff. I think it's usually due to salt crystals building up in between the moving parts here, so they often benefit from being stripped down and cleaned and put back together again just to get any salt out. But you can see that that flicks over quite nicely, so there's nothing needed to be done there at the moment. The bearing in the roller seems to be fairly loose. Don't think I'm getting any noise from that. It's difficult to see whether that's turning very freely. I'll just put a black mark on it, and so just with very gentle fingernail pressure, that's turning fine. So there's no problem there with the bearings. Incidentally, on the Mark 1, which this was, it came with one bearing in the roller. The Mark 2 comes with two bearings in the roller. This one's I've upgraded, and it has now both got two rollers in it, but that's just something to be aware of. If you've got an early one, it'll only have one bearing. The later ones, and I'm not sure when they changed it, probably somewhere around serial number 2000 I would guess, they started putting two bearings in. We'll strip that down in later on, and I can show you how to change the bearings and the roller itself if you need to. So I'm now going to take off the rotor. For this you need the spanner that was provided with the reel. It's offset here. You can see that it's deeper one side than the other. You need to use that deeper section to go down onto the top of the rotor, engage it with the tabs, and now this is a left-handed thread, so you turn this the opposite direction to what you would expect. So you turn it clockwise to remove the locking ring. Take that off. Okay, there is a little seal underneath there, a little O-ring. Doesn't wear, so shouldn't need to be replaced. And then the rotor just pulls off. We'll disassemble the various parts on the rotor at some later stage, but I'll probably leave it for now as nothing needs to be done. Okay, so there's the main body of the reel. Now, if you're just opening it up to investigate, make sure everything's okay, and perhaps to put some fresh grease in, it's always best to take on the side plate opposite the handle. You can take off the handle one, which we'll do in a moment, but if you just want to have a look inside and put some fresh grease in, take off the side which has got the opposite the handle side. And again, this one, use the spanner provided, and this is also a left-handed thread, so you need to do it clockwise to remove it. Now these can be quite tight, you need to press down hard, but bear in mind the spanner is only plastic, which is a good thing, because it means if you have a problem and you damage something, you'll damage the spanner rather than your reel. And you can always get a new spanner. The reel is a bit more expensive. So I'm just going to loosen that off completely. There we go. So you can see the insides. It's not too much there. The traverse mechanism going up and down. Grease is looking a little bit old. It looks a bit grey, but it's clean. There's no corrosion in there, no signs of any water intrusion. You can see on the main shaft here, there's some grease and oil, which is probably coming out through the seal here. So that seal probably needs replacing now. As I say, it's 7 years old, so I'm not surprised by that. So I will replace that. And you can hear that little bit of noise, which suggests there's something in the bearing here, which is, so I suspect if that's letting oil, grease and oil out, then it's potentially letting liquid, i.e. water, in. So that needs to be done. So if you were just wanting to look inside, make sure everything's okay, which that looks okay, you could clean it out of grease if you wanted to. I usually just add new grease when it's particularly clean and tidy. There's no problems inside there. So I would put some more grease in just to redistribute the grease around, put the side plate back on, making sure that seal here, that O-ring, stays in place. But we'll come to that when we reassemble. So what I'm going to do now is take off the opposite side. Again, left-handed thread, so clockwise to remove the plate. And there we have the other side. Again, the plate's in there, the bearing in there. No obvious signs of corrosion or water intrusion. Everything looks clean and tidy as it should do. We'll disassemble that shortly. Looking inside here, now this is where it pays to consider what you're doing. There we go, taking out the main bearing. Oh, that's got a lot of old grease on it, so we'll give that a good clean up. We'll freshen the grease on that. Okay, everything feels okay there. So I've just cleaned a little bit of the old grease off of this so I can see what I'm doing, but the next job is to remove this traverse mechanism from the bottom of the main shaft, and to do that we need to loosen that nut right at the end of the shaft. We need a small spanner with there we go. Just loosen. Loosen that off, and just behind the nut there's a little lock ring, lock washer. That's the nut and the lock washer. Put those to one side. Now that traverse mechanism has, or depending on how it was built, there can be some little washers in here which are designed to adjust the height of the spool to ensure an even line lay. So there could be 0 or 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 washers in there. So you need to be a bit careful when we take this apart, that we don't lose any of those washers. So just going to pull the transverse mechanism off. This can be a little bit sticky. It's the thread on the end of the shaft. It's very tight fit through the traverse guide. Just going to gently prise that off. It's quite stiff. Just trying to sort of wobble it off. Of course, there we go. And that comes off, leaving that little washer on the shaft. Of course it might have come off on the traverse, but in this case it stayed on the shaft, and I can just pull that off and again put it to one side along with the traverse guide. So having done that, we can now pull the shaft completely through the body. Then moving on now to disassemble the anti-reverse clutch. This requires quite a large spanner, as you can see. Large enough to grip that large nut, and just gently undo it. Right. Just take that off like that. Just turning the bearing here, it sounds and feels very smooth. Don't think there's a problem with the bearings or anything in there. So I'm not going to disassemble it. There's a little bit of oil leaking out of it, so it's still holding its lubrication. That bearing is very clean. Whatever's got in there is on that bearing. Yeah, I think that's grease. So everything looks good. I'll drop some oil in between the inside of the bearing. That's like that, just a tiny drop. Always have to be careful with anti-reverse bearings. This isn't the anti-reverse bearing, this is just the main shaft bearing. But the anti-reverse bearing, which is inside this assembly, best not to over lubricate them. They're well protected by seals. Everything seems to be okay there. That's lovely and clean in there. Just going to spray tiny amounts of grease just to give everything a little bit of lubrication and, more importantly, anti-corrosion. There are 3 tongues on here which must fit into the 3 little notches in the sides. So you have to be careful to align those 3 tangs, and then you just have to adjust that. ever so gently. That's the danger when you're using a big spanner, it's ever so easy to over force things, but just easing it in. Again, still sounds and feels very smooth, quiet. So that's reassembled fine. So I'm now going to spray a little bit of grease in the gap here between the housing and the anti-reverse mechanism. Sorry, that's wrong. That's oil. Let's do it with grease, shall we? There we go. Again, anti-corrosion, a little bit of lubrication, and we're going to give this gear here a liberal coating of grease too. Okay, so now we'll start the major part of the reassembly. So first thing we need to do is put the traverse mechanism back on. So we need to put that little adjustment washer on first. Which is a little bit difficult to align because it's actually shaped to go on the flats machined in the side of the shaft. This is probably why it took a little bit to come off, because it needs to be precisely aligned. There we go, that's got it on. Pushed up against the shoulder on the shaft. Then we need to put on the traverse mechanism. Likewise, you have to align it with the shape of the shaft. Which is difficult to see, but there it is. So that's on too. And we need to put on that little tab washer, the little lock nut. I think both together, because that's, yes, that's got a larger diameter to keep that lock washer aligned. A little bit fiddly. Easier to turn the shaft and hold the nut than it is to hold the shaft and turn the nut. There we go. Okay. Just going to make sure that that tab washer is correctly aligned on the shoulder, on the nut. Going to pinch that up, not too tight. Again, these things not subject to any rotation, so just pinch it up tight. The tab washer should hold it. Okay, nice and smooth. Everything seems to be okay there. Good. So next job is to put on the main gear and this handle side cover. Now, remembering that these rollers on the traverse mechanism face opposite the handle. So we can put this, not forgetting the O-ring. Let's position that in place gently. Often helps to coat your fingers with grease so that everywhere you touch, in fact that's what I'm just going to do now, I'm just going to spray a bit of grease on the, dab my finger in it and then just rub that all the way round, making sure that the O-ring stays in its slot. We don't want that to come out while we're screwing on the cover. That doesn't want to stay in there at the moment. Let's keep pushing it in. There. It's nicely in its slot. Then the gear. Goes on, remembering now that it was a left-handed thread, so to put it on you need to turn it anti-clockwise. Just trying to find where the start of the thread is. While we're doing this, we need to make sure that that pin on the gear wheel that drives the traverse up and down is sat nicely in the S shape of the traverse guide. So we're putting the side cover on, making sure that that pin there, just make sure you can see it. Can you see that? The pin that's rotating on the shaft is engaged in that template and pushing the traverse up and down. If we're confident of that, we can then pinch it up tight. No need to do these up very tight, they tend to self-tighten I think in use. So, yep, that's running up and down. I'm going to give a liberal spray of grease all around the gear, on the rubber bushings on the traverse mechanism bearings. Seems to be nice and smooth. Not forgetting to put the other O-ring on the other side. Again, I'm going to use that bit of grease on my finger just to make sure that it's lubricated. Gives it a little bit of stiction in the groove. There we are. Push it right down in there so it stays in. And put on the other side panel. Oh. Again, plenty of grease in here. Just going to smooth that around so it's covering the whole surface. As this is the surface that the traverse guides rub against. Again, remembering this is a left-handed thread, so in order to do it up you need to turn it anti-clockwise, making sure you don't see any of that O-ring pinching and coming out of the side. There we go. Looks okay. So we can just again pinch it up nice and tight, but not too tight. Same on the other side. Okay, and there we go. So good. Now we're going to reassemble the main parts of the reel again. So we're going to put the rotor on, aligning those two pins there with that long slot across the centre of the rotor. That's it. And applying this retaining ring, again remembering this is an anti-clockwise to do up thread, the left-handed thread again. You can use the tool to make sure it's pinched up tight. Put the spool back on. Drag adjustment knob. Handle. And there we have it. Internals checked, nothing actually changed. But that's how to strip the main housing of the VR50. My next video will be about changing the roller bearings and maybe the roller itself. It does grooves. Changing the spring on the bell arm. I haven't had one break on me yet, but I have had the plastic tube that the spring rides on. That's snapped on me. And also how to lubricate and change the bushings inside the bell arm mechanisms there, because they do wear with salt especially. And we'll also take the handle or knob off and change the bearings in the knob and the handle.